A beautiful thing to behold. This is how U.S. President Donald Trump described the long-term effects of his tariffs after trillions of dollars were wiped off global stock markets. Asian markets saw steep drops this morning as exchanges reopened for the first time since Trump's latest tariffs gambit. China swiftly hit back on Friday with strong and sprawling countermeasures, including additional tariffs of 34% on all U.S. imports starting on April the 10th. Taking to his Truth Social platform, Trump blasted China's move as panicked. But is it the White House that is panicking now? How are Trump's tariffs impacting average Americans? Will these tariffs make America great again in the long run? Welcome to The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined here in the studio by Aina Tangen, Senior Fellow with the think tank Taihe Institute, and Professor Liu Baocheng, Dean at the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics here in Beijing. And we're also joined online from Washington, D.C. by Surabh Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Let's take a look at the performance of Asian stock markets, a bloodbath, if I may use the word, within first hour of trading after markets reopened. Shanghai Composite down by 6.6%, Hang Seng down by nearly 10%, Australia about 4.5%, Nikkei 6%, Singapore down 7%, so on and so forth. Aina, has Trump's tariffs policy triggered a global crisis?
Yeah, he's triggered a trade war that has led to loss of confidence, that has led to the crisis. He's doing exactly the opposite of what he intends. He wants to make America strong again, and what he's doing is he's destroying the globe, not helping his people.
Well, he's claiming that this is temporary pain, that this is going to work in the long run. What is your reaction to that?
He's bluffing. He doesn't have the cards, as he likes to put it. He wants to convince the world he has four aces, when in fact he doesn't even have a pair. The U.S. is so integrated into the global supply system. It cannot separate itself. And charging more for everything is just going to put the burden on the consumers. So there's no way out for him. It's a bluff. And pretty soon you're going to hear him saying, well, I've taught everyone a lesson. They now respect me. They know now they'll come and negotiate with me. His usual stuff.
Professor Liu, do you think President Trump have anticipated a global market reaction in such a scale in the first place when he was formulating the policy?
Well, he could have anticipated such a turmoil, but he doesn't really have a solution. And right now, he just wanted to create a chaos and subvert all the international trading system and to show that it is not exactly America first, but the Trump first. So every attention should be focused on him, even negatively. So he's looking for a spotlight of himself. And now there's no rational calculation that this can lead to his final objective of narrowing the trade deficit for the United States, or bring jobs, or bring manufacturing opportunities to the U.S. Actually, he's doing the opposite. And so it is easy to smash the whole system, but he has no idea of the consequence of his action, and also has no idea what would be a more constructive picture that can really bring the world together based on the basic economics.
Yeah, Supta, what is your take on the fact that the markets have reacted so strongly to Trump's announcement, Trump's measures? Do you think when the White House was formulating this policy, they foresee the potential negative consequences, not just on foreign markets, but on U.S. stock markets? I mean, within 2 days, $6 trillion were vaporized.
Perhaps not as much as has been, as you said, vaporized from the stock market. They expected that there would be a certain fall in the stock in the stock indices. But to be frank, I would say, as for Trump is concerned, Trump is the guy who used to be all stock market, stock market, stock market. But right now, actually, to be frank, he doesn't care. His view is, and he has harbored this view for a very, very long time, that about trade deficits and their unfairness. He has a misguided view on that. And he finally feels that now, as King Donald, who rules and reigns over Washington, he can do what he wants and he's doing that now. And he also feels that his political and policy timetables are very different, and he doesn't have a very long political timetable. He needs to do this quickly. He's getting it done, and he's hoping that down the line, later in the year, when he can get his tax and deregulation policies through, then that will counteract, and again, the market will go up. But to be frank, I'll say at this point of time, he doesn't care, and that's the scary part.
Well, Trump actually, in reaction to the market crashes over the weekend, he said, "I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix things." Aina, you're giggling a little bit. What is your reaction to what he's saying? It seems, well, he finds a way to get around, right? He finds a way to prove that he's right on everything. But is it really the case here? Can he really defend his measures, looking at how people have reacted?
No, he can't. That's the problem. I mean, I say he's bluffing. You've pointed out that there's no substance to this. I've been on different shows around the globe, and I can tell you that there isn't somebody who's willing to defend him outside his own administration. You're already starting to see Republicans who are defecting. They don't want to see this. They're concerned about what's going to happen in the midterms and their own reelection. He's just looking for some sort of face-saving way of getting out of this. He didn't anticipate this kind of reaction. He thought there'd be a bump, but that everyone would, look at Donald Trump and say, "Oh yeah, he's got the idea," because he's surrounded by people who are just, echoing that you're great, Donald, you have the plan, just go forward with it.
How can he reassure the American people, the Main Street, that this is going to get better? That this is going to benefit them potentially?
Well, it isn't. You start looking at the polls, he's dropping precipitously. I mean, there's three things that Donald Trump cares about that we know. He cares about polls. He's always looking at the polls on a daily basis. He cares about what's on the news because he's always watching it. He doesn't read. All right. And the last part, he cares about the market. Right now, all three of them are in the negative territory. He's trying to hold out, but as I said, it's just face saving at this point. He in a very, very short period, the bloodbath will be so intense, he will be looking for cover.
Professor Liu, do you think the things will work out potentially for America after this short-term shock to the system?
Well, in which trajectory does it really work out? So the Emancipation Day could be a recession day. Recession day, and it can lead to Great Depression. If you look at all the emergency plans along the U.S. history, it all leads to big federal deficit and eventually a big depression. So now he's not really using 301 clause, not using 232, but rather to take advantage of the emergency power that is given to him for temporary purposes so that he doesn't need to prove that there is a reality that the U.S. economy is going to hurt, U.S. National interest is going to be threatened, but he just take advantage. But then the empowerment is really very short-lived. It could be only last 1 year. I do not think that any rational people would approve him for renewal. So now he's now in a desperate position. He just wanted to quickly get the gratification, but now already things are turning to the opposite. If you look at not only the stock, but also the rally in Washington and also the protest in California and the recent statement by the governor of California, that it's really create a very high political diffusion, not only in the world, but also within his own cabinets. And right now, if you look at the Benson's the Secretary of Treasury's speech, he's really, trying to make his statement more logical, but in the end, he has to comply and straddle in between the allegiance to Donald Trump, but also, with common sense of basic economics.
Well, let's take a look at the reaction from global governments and from China in particular. China has been the world's first major economy to reciprocate the U.S. measure. Actually, China came out with, within a day, 11 measures altogether, including, as I said, 34% of tariffs on all U.S. imports. China also added 11 U.S. bodies to the unreliable entities list. China has brought the U.S. to the WTO, to the World Trade Court. In my words, China has suspended import qualifications for products from 6 U.S. companies in agriculture and meat industry, and China also imposed export control on some rare earth minerals. Gupta, how do you look at the signal China is sending by reacting so strongly and so swiftly, if you agree with my description?
Oh, I totally agree with your description. I think China's strategy has been, and remember, this is the third round of tariffs on China. We've had 2 rounds of fentanyl related. And China's response has been that there will be an assured response. It will be immediate. It will be wide ranging, but it will be measured. Yes, it has been a strong response, but it is also measured and leaves the door open for negotiation. I think Xi Jinping has got it right this time around in his battles with Donald Trump, that he is not going to wait for Donald Trump to pick up the phone and pass sweet words in exchange. The measure of what the administration does, not what Donald Trump says, is how China is going to react while keeping the door open to negotiation. I think it's a great strategy. It's the right strategy. And we'll have to see how the Americans, but the leverage that the Americans thought that they could have with China and hope that China would dither in its response has not been the case. And this has put America on the back foot in terms of how it is going to take forward the negotiation. Because at the end of the day, I'll tell you, I don't know where the Trump administration is, but Donald Trump would like to cut a good, sweet deal with President Xi, because he knows China is a wealthy country and he can hopefully get a lot of market access for his producers, ranchers, agriculturalists, etc. He wants a deal, but he is really querying the pitch and I would say poisoning the well to making that deal possible down the future.
President Trump's response in a characteristic all capital social media post, he said China played it wrong after China reacted. He said China played it wrong, they panicked, and the one thing they cannot afford to do. Aina, your reaction, has China really panicked?
No, not at all. China has been very measured. I agree with Gupta on this. There are a lot more things that China has that they can do. The U.S., as I said, is integrated into the global supply chain. It cannot escape that. It is simply adding more cost onto its consumers. And at the same time, the dollar is plunging. And that magnifies the issue, because if the dollar was worth 100 yesterday, today it's going to be worth 90. And what that does is that increases costs, increases inflation. And these things are going to play out over the next month. And Donald Trump knows it's coming. As I say, I think we would all agree that he has reached the end of his bluffing rope, and he's going to be looking to stand down. This whole thing that China is panicking, it's he who is panicking. I mean, he's the $10 trillion man responsible for the largest decrease in the world capital by any one individual. If you go back to the pandemic, yes, it was severe, but that was a natural cause. This is not.
Yeah, I mean, if China would have panicked, Professor Liu, China would have picked up the phone, called the White House, sent a letter, please don't do this, let's talk, like what some countries have done. But China, instead of doing that, it doesn't seem to have blinked at all. Instead, it says, okay, if you are going to punish me with these tariffs, I'm going to punch back, I'm to hit back, and I'm going to, fight to the end. Is that the kind of message that China is sending? It doesn't sound like panicking to me at all.
Well, I think this is a very typical business negotiation strategy. You set up a sort of prisoner's dilemma, and many of those potential customers can react differently based on the information asymmetry. And he would expect that many of those countries can really go there and kiss his reins in order to satisfy his
China is not doing
ego.
that. But China is not satisfying his
and
ego
then
here.
China is now pushed to the corner, because if you add all the legacies during his first administration on the tariff against China, and the fentanyl-related one, and the blanket one, and now the 34, that's add up. I made a calculation to 89%. And not to mention the special tariff against Chinese ships, etc.
But that doesn't seem to have prevented China from announcing these 34% tariffs.
Exactly. So, China actually acted in a very measured but also in a prompt way in the reciprocal tariff. But in the meantime, I would also like to see that China would calculate more of the precision in two ways. One is that do we really target the vulnerable part of the Trump's decision power, particularly his constituencies, in generating the desired result. And the second, we also need to carefully,
that's your opinion, but if you look at
calculate.
China's reaction, China actually targeted these companies that are selling agriculture and meat products to China, basically hitting.
But there's another part to this, and that is that what is the effect of this? Actually, it goes towards Europe. There's this issue about medical equipment. A lot of the things that are being on that list are things that Europe can supply, and the things that are not, in terms of agriculture, those go to the countries that like to trade with China, like South Africa, Brazil, etc.
Well,
so
these
it has two parts to this.
I mean, the 6 U.S. companies, for instance, are poultry providers, agricultural companies. Clearly, China is sending a message to the people who are so-called in the
Here's the big message. The big message is that somebody's willing to stand up to the bully.
Exactly,
And
that's how I read it.
when the rest of the country the world sees this, all of a sudden they say, well, wait a second. We can stand up to them if China will.
Yeah, Gupta, as I said, China is the first major economy to actually take action, announce the real concrete actions, while the others have condemned, have criticized. But I have not seen another major economy, including the European Unions, to really say we are going to do this from this day. And China says we will put these actions in effect starting April the 10th. Where does China get its confidence? Why is China so sure of itself in this regard?
I think China is sure in this regard because it has seen how matters played out during the first term, during Trump's first term. And China did retaliate, but it hoped that there would be enough space for negotiation. And in the end, I mean, the negotiation failed, and China continued to be hit by those tariffs. China is trying to do what it's doing in a very predictable mode, so that as if both it has agency and to an extent that it doesn't even have agency, that these are going to go forward anyway and place the ball on the US side, so that the US has to internally negotiate with itself whether it's going to do more or not. China is not the one going to negotiate with itself whether we are going to come and respond to the countermeasures. What I would say also there is, yes, China has gone first, but be sure the European countermeasures will come. Europe takes a longer time in getting that consensus right because it is a community of nation states, and it will take time. And remember, Canada has also retaliated, even though it's such a small player relative to the US, but it has taken bold decisions.
Yeah, it seems that China has definitely done the calculation beforehand. China has thought about it. China has prepared ahead of time so that they didn't come up with this reaction in a day's time. But if in an interview, and Trump said, China cannot afford to do that. Obviously, China showed to the world it can afford to do that. Otherwise, it would be shooting itself in the foot. And in an interview with Tucker Carlson, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he believed there is nothing China can do in response to U.S. tariffs. That is before China reacted, a few hours before China reacted. Aina, what is your take on U.S. Treasury Secretary thinking China needs the United States so much that they couldn't possibly stand up to the bully?
Well, it's that old American exceptionalist line that we are at the center of the world.
Oh, they were so ignorant of what China is.
Well, it's a lot of arrogance. But, I watched a number of interviews that he's given. And, here's a guy who's worked for two very powerful but opposite people. George Soros gave him billions to start funds. Didn't work out very well. But in any event, he was with them. Now, all of a sudden, he's with Donald Trump. And in both cases, he's always arguing for the boss. And it doesn't add up.
He's a university professor.
Well, that's the least of it. I mean, here's a guy who benefited from financialization to the
from
tune
Wall
of
Street,
he's worth in minimum $500 million. He's in gold right now as everyone else is panicking and losing money on their stocks. So here's a guy who benefited from financialization and then goes on television and said, financialization's terrible. You know, it's ruining our economy and things like this. This is like the fox going into the chicken house and saying, why are there so few chickens here after I've eaten so many?
But really, what are the facts, Professor Liu, concerning the dependency of Chinese economy on its trade or its exports to the United States? Because we looked at the numbers. China's exports to the United States only accounted for less than 5% of its GDP. And China's trade with ASEAN countries, for instance, actually have surpassed the level of China's trade with the United States, and the trend is continuing. So somebody must have not checked the facts before they say China has to depend on the U.S. economy, and China cannot afford to stand up to the U.S. bully.
China-U.S. trade now stands roughly around $500 billion US, which is, means that the U.S. is still the single country that enjoys the largest trade with China, and also China earns the biggest surplus from a single country. That's a fact. But the dependence on the U.S. market has been reducing all along, from 16% now to last year's 11%, and now. China can really survive on its own, actually, without even interacting with the rest of the world. We have been surviving for the last 5,000 years. But to bring more prosperity and also play fairness, we need to work with more trusted partners. So that's why we shifted more to ASEAN countries. And also, during the past 6 years, since the start of the trade war, China has been preparing, particularly participated by the business community. We are really dispersing the international supply chain, and over the years you see that so many businesses are investing in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Africa, etc.
And importing from other markets other than the United
Exactly.
States.
So therefore, China has been pushed. Now also the world has been pushed to get more allied against the U.S. type of uncertainty, now the bully. So right now, what China is doing, one is, of course, we reciprocate the tariff, but in the meanwhile, it also, China also earns better recognition in the world to defend multilateralism. So therefore, China is expected to play a more important role to integrate more on the regional basis and also with some of the trusted partners.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that.
Yeah.
Look, you can't. Yes, direct trade with the U.S. has gone down, but you start looking at trade with ASEAN and other countries, that's gone up. Why? Because China makes the intermediate goods. So a garment made in Bangladesh, guess what? Where did the cloth come from? Where did the thread come from? Where did the buttons come from?
The world is interconnected.
Yeah. It all came from China, but there is no other alternative. So the U.S. is simply taxing its own people for Donald Trump's
Well, talking
benefit.
about the U.S. taxing its own people, there's a lot of question asked about how much exactly will American consumers pay for these tariffs. And we take a look at Treasury Secretary's interview, and he actually said two different things. Let's take a listen of the first thing he said on the same Tucker Carlson interview a day after the tariff announcement. Take a listen to this.
We saw there's a study out recently from a group at MIT that shows that with President Trump's first China tariffs, which were approximately 20%, the price level went up 0.7.
So for 20%, the price went up 0.7%, meaning Americans pay less than 1% higher when there is 20% tariffs added. But later in the same interview, he said this.
If we think like a classical model of tariff income would say, if there's a 10% tariff and then the U.S. consumer might have a one-time price adjustment of 2%.
So, Einar, does he know what he's talking about?
Sure, he's talking about Donald Trump's policies, and they're indefensible, and so as a result, he gets caught in a kind of web of contradictions.
So how much will American consumers pay exactly when we have 34% added?
Well, Americans are really facing two tough burdens. One is the national debt, because right now, with $30 trillion US national debt, every individual American citizen would have to pay more than $100,000 US. And now with more of the added tariff, during the first round of the trade war, American household normally takes the 1,700 US dollars burden. But now, if we really beef up, not only with China, the U.S. is really having a blanket of a tariff against the world, and then my rough estimation is that the U.S. household is going to pay more than 5,000 US dollars in that regard. This is particularly bullish to many of the low-income households.
Gupta, what does these two soundbites show to you? Does the Trump administration officials know really what they're talking about? They're contradicting themselves in the same interview.
The Trump administration has wanted to point to the first term to show that we raised tariffs and yet the economy did well enough, and therefore this time around it'll also do well enough. First of all, what I would submit is that during that first term, the global economy was in a kind of a disinflationary environment. It's very different environment right now. The scale of the tariffs also right now are far, far greater. There is going to be a shock on the American side in terms of the discomfort and hardship that it is creating for its own citizens. And that will take a little while to percolate through. It's percolated into capital markets, but it will percolate into inflation and into household daily budgets. And at that point of time, I think the Republicans and the Trump administration will be hit very hard from a political standpoint.
How much? Well, Trump has told Americans, I guess the MAGA people, to hang tough on all this tariffs theater. What does that actually mean? Because he wants to protect these American workers who are actually not doing very well. And with all the tariffs, and now with the prospect of manufacturing jobs coming back very bleak, how much can have people hold on to this before they actually see some turning around of the situation? Gupta.
Will hang on for a long time. They take his word as the gospel truth. But the fact of the matter is,
and recession fears is hyped.
And recession fears. I mean, the mainstream America, the median voter in America is going to sour on Trump and is already souring on Trump because they voted him in because they thought he would work for their economic well-being, and that's exactly the opposite that he has been doing, and that's already showing up in polls. And when these forces get entrenched, the negative dynamic from the tariffs get entrenched, I think this is just going to be very hard politically. And that's why he's talking about, I will create manufacturing jobs in Rust Belt industries, and I will have tax cuts and deregulation and energy, blah, blah, blah. He's trying to hold out all sorts of sweet promises, but the sky is going to collapse on those promises at some point of time, and sooner rather than later, frankly.
Finally, we're running out of time. Aina, all of these supposedly is to fix America's economic problems like closed factories, rising inflation, housing markets so expensive that Americans can't afford to buy a home. Is what we see is the kind of medicine prescription they're writing for the American economy the right solution for the problem?
No, and you can't find any worthwhile economists who would back that up. And the optics here are terrible. I mean, at the same time as he's asking people to take hard medicine, guess what? He's passing through a $4 trillion tax cut that disproportionately advances the interests of the wealthy. So this is going to rebound on him very, very quickly. And as we've been saying, it's a bluff and it'll be over.
How big is the threat of recession, Professor Liu?
Yeah.
Very quickly.
If you create a solution based on wrong diagnosis, definitely you're going to make the patient even more ill. So now the recession is really coming to town. It's not only the economic recession, but also the political depression is at the doorstep.
And inflicting pain on citizens in other parts of the world. Look at the stock market losses that investors in other parts. This is not going to bode well for the United States and for its soft power. Anyway, we have to leave it there, and let's keep close watch on the situation. Many thanks to Aina Tangen, Liu Baocheng, and Surabh Gupta for joining us for this live edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Li Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. You've got The Point.